stay with demographics and genres for a moment, because I'm just curious how you see demographics, age and gender shaping genre choices in gaming.
I think a modern marketer in app marketing or mobile gaming marketing needs to really realize that we're very much in a product-led industry. But ultimately, the stronger your LTV is, the more likely you're going to be able to compete and scale within the UA landscape.
We're also looking a lot at building publisher side audiences. How's that looking with you and at Rovio?
We see this time and time again. Players do enjoy incentivized ads. I think programmatic is for brand advertising in mobile gaming is still a little bit far off, but I think doing bespoke direct deals is definitely a thing. And then at the end, we have a big party and celebrate everything.
Yeah. You say that, a party where I saw your moves. I mean, breakdancing, I wouldn't have thought it. What don't you do? This is The Groove, where I sit down and have bold conversations with some of the biggest, boldest minds in marketing, apps, AI, and in this case, also gaming, also sponsored by Verve, looking at the big trends. So it's big, 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 and big. Here, Luis, we have Luis de la Cámara, another big name in the industry, VP of Marketing at Rovio. Luis, it is such a pleasure to welcome you. And above all, because, I've seen you over the years. I've watched your career. So when I'm talking about big, big changes, what for you has been the biggest change at Rovio since you've been there?
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. And I used to listen to your podcast a long time ago, so it's funny to finally be on one of them. But always found them very insightful. I think the biggest change actually came quite early when I first joined actually Rovio a little over 3 years ago. I was hired as VP marketing for a previous VP of marketing person that had been promoted to a COO role. That person went on a leave and eventually left the business. And so pretty much instantly, I in just a few months of joining, I started reporting directly to the CEO. I would say interestingly, like my role itself is kind of gone way beyond marketing at Rovio. I've always, like my whole career, I've always really sort of looked at that bridge between marketing and product. A lot of my focus is looking at product and product portfolio, product development, looking at free to play live games and new game development, and so I've spent a lot of time in the 3 years that I have been at Rovio looking at that topic at the same time as leading our marketing functions. And then, for about a year ago or so, I joined the leadership team at the company as well. So from a professional standpoint, it was also, a step up to actually be part of the team that's steering the business.
And it was very smart in a way that you were able to bring product and marketing together so early in your position, because that's certainly one of the trends. I mean, product is marketing. Particularly now, marketing isn't what it used to be. So the product has to be solid. If the product is solid, the marketing will follow. That's sort of the mantra out there.
Way back earlier in my career, I started off. So I've been in gaming since 2006. I started off in AAA console gaming, and then moved into mobile free to play in 2013. Already in sort of the console days, my role was called a product manager, even though it was a marketing product manager. But it was about marketing strategy, marketing campaigns to grow our games or launch our games in the console space. But even then, I was already looking at ways. My focus was how to expand some of these games into international markets. And so already back then, I was already thinking about how to like impact product in a way to then impact our marketing growth strategy. I think then in a more official way in 2013, when I moved to mobile free to play, I think games as a service kind of requires marketing to be super close to product. And in my career, it's always been the mindset of like, how do we make sure that marketing is just an extension of the game studio? And especially as you start to move then later in the years where user acquisition became a very important topic, how user acquisition responsibilities were not something completely siloed from the game development and the game leadership, that they actually had to have some certain level of ownership over that as well and understanding. And so over the years, there's been a move to bring those things much closer together, at least in the companies that I've worked for. So what happens once players actually are already playing the game, and how do we kind of keep them engaged and playing more and coming back, etc. So think about live ops and events, and how do we, in-game communication and social media and marketing to existing players. And then more recently, before joining Rovio, with Scopely, similarly, being the head of growth for one of our game studios, which is a longer story. But now I'm in a central function as a key business leader. But it's always been this idea of like product and marketing are go hand in hand. They're actually the same. They're part of the same thing. Players don't see this as two separate things.
First, it was sort of like almost forced in this direction, but when you think about it, it's very, very much exactly the background, the mindset, the thinking that you need.
Yeah, exactly. I think a modern marketer in app marketing or mobile gaming marketing needs to really realize that we're very much in a product led business, product led industry, and so what players or users, I guess, if you're an app marketer, at the end of the day, the best experience you can deliver to your customers, and having them wanting to come back and giving them giving them real value for their time and sometimes their money, is ultimately what matters most. And then figuring out ways to then acquire new users and how to get new users. Then of course there's other marketing and brand strategies that you can start considering. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, you have to have a very strong product. In fact, I think that sort of switches to another topic, which is around the importance of lifetime value, right? And the stronger your LTV, the more kind of competitive you're going to be able to be in user acquisition. As you know, almost everything nowadays is an auction, where different products are bidding for impressions, and obviously the stronger your lifetime value is, the more competitive you're likely going to be. Of course, there's a marketability function, which is something else we think about a lot. But ultimately, the stronger your LTV is, the more likely you're going to be able to compete and scale within the UA landscape.
We talk about product led, but I think now it's very much a shift to experience led, particularly when I think about the experience of catching up with you and your entire team at RovioCon. I mean, that was very, very impressive. And I look to events like that to show me what's just around the corner, what's just over the horizon. What was your takeaway from that event?
For those that have never been there before, we have like a model in which it's these main stage talks for the 900 people that show up can all sit down and watch on a large stage some a little bit of entertainment, but especially insightful talks and panels. And then we try to go deeper in the early evening or late afternoon. What we do is we have these breakout stages, whether that's growth, whether that's product, whether it's AI and tech, sustainability and things like that, so that folks who want to go deeper into things, and a little bit more tactical, a little bit more tangible, they can go in there. And then at the end, we have a big party and celebrate everything. Yeah.
You say that, a party where I saw your moves, which is another amazing side of you, Luis. I mean, breakdancing, I wouldn't have thought it, but wow.
Yeah.
What don't you do, really? So we go from your big changes, big events. Let's go to big trends, right?
So the reality is, like, we have a super competitive market within mobile gaming specifically, but then other entertainment apps have also started to compete directly for that time. And so that's already like time and money is already being, is already sort of being split across different options. I think just kind of going narrower into mobile gaming specifically, mobile free-to-play gaming, what I notice mainly is a world of where the big get bigger. And so we do see some breakout successes, which is really interesting to see, because I think a few years ago it was harder to see those. But it is true that once you get to that top echelon of top grossing, there's a bit of like a snowball effect. I was talking to someone who's an ex-Google exec, and how he shared with me that the way the store algorithms work is that if you're like top 20 grossing is when you really matter to those stores, and because they take 30% share of revenue, and so therefore if they're maximizing and optimizing for their own revenue, and so it's in their own interest to have high monetizing, high popular games be pushed even further. And so it becomes this sort of snowball effect that if you get into that upper echelon of like top grossing, that you then have this sort of like growth wheel from the app stores themselves.
That makes sense because they're earning too. So yes, the big have to get bigger because then there's a bigger cut. There's more of it.
And this is not new to industries, right? Like, I mean, it's new to us because we've been in this sort of hyper growth mode for, as I said, I joined mobile free to play in 2013, which maybe that was like 1 year into sort of the industry really sort of taking off. So I've been able to ride most of that wave of growth, and probably end of 2022 until now, it's been kind of the new reality of a much more mature, much more saturated market. I think there are now fewer new games coming into the market, which is interesting, versus where historically there was a lot more. But it's also because it's that much harder to succeed. And even if you have an incredibly strong, powerful product or service, as we said earlier, that has really strong KPIs, you then need a huge treasure chest to compete in the UA landscape, right? So you need to be an established company that has that, or you need the financing to be able to do that, whether that's through VC financing or through venture debt or something like similar to that. So it's not available to everyone to really sort of scale a game to become a top grossing game. Even if you are incredibly innovative, even if you make an amazing game, you still need some support behind you to be able to take it to that. And I'm not even talking about the talent and skills that you need as well to do that.
Of course, the other shift that we continue to see is hyper casual, hybrid casual, whatever you want to call it. How do you see hyper casual, hybrid casual games evolving as they need to and seek to enhance player engagement?
The reality is there's still some games that are pure hyper casual the way they used to be. They're still doing well, but it's much more complex than it used to be. The hit rate is much, much lower. And so you see the likes of the Voodoos and Rolex and other types of companies like that, even ourselves and with Ruby Studio, which we have in Izmir in Turkey, move towards this buzzword called hybrid casual. I think that is a bit of a buzzword. It's definitely not a genre. I think some people get confused thinking it's a genre. I think it's more of a business strategy than a genre. If you really try to break down what hybrid casual means, it means that you're getting low cost for acquisition, kind of akin to the cost that you would get with hybrid casual, maybe a little bit more expensive, but really, really kind of very wide funnel games that are able to attract players at a very, very low cost, but then the LTV to CAC ratio is much much more in favor of the LTV, and therefore you can then scale that game significantly. That's sort of the philosophy behind that. But if you think about it, like that's in reality where a lot of the casual games have been historically, right? They tend to command cheaper CPIs than the mid-core games have done historically. If you look at Royal Match, and you look at the LTVs they have today, they're actually kind of pretty similar to some of the mid-core LTVs that you used to have when mid-core was like really, really powerful, pre-ATT or whatever.
You talk about all the changes, post ATT, post IDFA, post privacy in our new landscape, restricting, among other things, also targeting. What are the alternative targeting strategies that you think show promise in this new landscape?
So definitely on the iOS side, things were disrupted through Apple tracking transparency. I think of all the ad networks. As I said, I've been doing this since 2013. I think all the ad networks, the one that was most disrupted by this was not only, but the one that was definitely Meta. Before ATT, Meta was taking a massive amount of wallet share across all game companies, and they had this amazing ability to sort of with sniper precision, find the exact perfect player for your game, right? And that was massively disrupted by ATT. And today, I would say the company, the ad network that is winning at the moment is AppLovin, and they have done probabilistic attribution. So they've kind of they've been small enough to be under the radar, I would say, of like, Apple's focus. And so they've been very focused on doing things their own way. And on top of that, they have their own ad mediation engine, which is very powerful as well. And so that combination of both, between the probabilistic attribution um, combined with their dominance in ad mediation, I believe has really allowed them to be incredibly successful in finding great quality players for different games. I wouldn't say it performs equally as well across all genres. Um, I think, like, for example, in the puzzle genre, they're very, very strong. Some other genres probably have a bit of a different mix. But that being said, I think some of the other ad networks, including Meta, have really started to step their game up
Yeah,
again.
Meta is upping its game,
Yeah,
literally.
absolutely. And I think having spoken to some of the execs at Meta, they were honest that they were very disrupted by ATT, that they decided to focus first on mobile web and e-commerce, and try to really solve that first, post the sort of ATT disruption, before they move back to mobile gaming. And so that's why probably people's share of wallet on Meta came down quite significantly the first year and a half at post ATT, and then I think over the last year they've really been hyper focused again on mobile gaming. So I'm very bullish on where Meta's going. And then there's other, Google as well. At the end of the day, you need to scale. The way to scale your games is to find as much, to try to onboard as many networks as you can and be as competitive as you can in as many of those networks. And again, I'm not a UA guy. It's not my background, but obviously as a marketing leader, it's been a hugely important focus over the years for me to learn more about. And what I've noticed is like scale comes from having really strong lifetime value, having good marketability, and then being able to onboard as many networks and manage as many networks as you can.
That brings us to new acquisition channels. I know UA isn't what you do, but it is part of marketing, and it is part of also shaping the genre. You are what you attract, basically. And we're going beyond the traditional channels, looking at other channels. What are the channels you believe are effective when it comes to UA or AdMon at a high level?
The baseline is that we want to get and scale as best we can our traditional user acquisition channels, but then layer on top of that new forms of acquisition. The thing that I talk to my teams about is kind of going back to some of the basics when it comes to marketing, right? Some of those traditional, the 4Ps. So, product placement, promotion, and pricing.
Sounds like you teach them to your team.
Well, yeah, I do like. I think like a lot of them do have enough knowledge about this, but it's sometimes a good reminder, especially performance marketers who've been so much in the weeds of just user acquisition channels and sort of forget some of the basics of marketing. But the reason I bring this up is because it's also about like who's your game for, who cares about your game, and what do we know about those players, and how do we then learn about their discovery journey, and then how do we make sure that our marketing strategy is part of that discovery journey, right? And what I mean by that is, if you've got a puzzle game that is focused on men and women who are 50 plus, 45 plus, probably traditional user acquisition channels is going to be one of the best ways to do that. And then is CTV an interesting way, because some of them still watch a lot of television. What other kind of user behaviors that we could tap into versus going if you're making a game for Gen Z and Gen Alpha and young millennials, for example, like look at how their Supercell's marketing is. It's very different, right? They're much more community driven. They're much more influencer marketing driven. They do big collabs with big IP, like SpongeBob was the recent one they did. Brawl Stars, I think, is probably the benchmark of IP collabs, and they've grown 10x. Like Brawl Stars is incredible, the growth story there, and a lot of it is they've just tapped into the zeitgeist of what high school students and young college students are talking about. But really, it starts with like having an incredible product that is designed for that audience and very social. But then they really do an amazing job in terms of influencer marketing, creator community, and then scaling through that creator community. So again, it's like the strategy that you want to take with different games and different products really depends on the audiences and how they discover games or how they discover their entertainment and make entertainment choices, and then try to tailor your strategy based on that. Like, not trying to find the exact same formula for everyone, because people are different based on their demographics.
It's interesting. It starts with the demographics, which it does. I mean, we lost track of that in the excitement of UA. It was just like, let's try everything. But now we're back to looking at, demographic influences. I want to stay with demographics and genres for a moment, because I'm just curious how you see demographics, age and gender shaping genre choices in gaming, because it is shifting.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because when you start doing like research into your games, especially in casual games, which are very broad, like a game like Angry Birds 2, as an example, which is our flagship game, when you actually look at the breakdown of age group, we actually have players of all age groups, from like children all the way up to people in their 60s, early 70s. Like, we literally have players of all age groups. Now, the distribution is not exactly the same, and then the in-game behavior is very different. And what we see, for example, is at the top of the funnel, we see much younger audiences, right? So the majority of people that are actually downloading Angry Birds 2 are young players. They're whatever, eh, teenagers, young adults. But then when you actually see who sticks around, who actually spends, and actually who engages in elder game features, you actually have a much older demographic in that case, right? We have folks that are in their 50s who are spending a lot of time and engaging and spending a lot of money in the game. And so it's really interesting to understand that even from a single game perspective, you can have these different age groups and different demographics. You could call them different personas, and they actually are interested and motivated by different things, and their in-game behavior and their in-game spending behavior can be quite different. The challenge from both a game design point of view is like, who should you be designing for, but also from a marketing point of view, like, who should we be focusing on when it comes to our marketing strategies? Do we want to just increase volume, and therefore we need to think more about some of those younger groups? Or do we want to be a little bit more niche and more like quality focused, and think more about like the high spender type of a demographic? And then, but that's because it's much more niche, it becomes a lot harder to find them. What's the right approach? So that's always this debate that we have internally. And then I think from the product team, as I said, like, how much time should they be spending on the early funnel of the game, and the onboarding, etc. And can they actually find ways to monetize that younger group better versus spending more time on like clan features and competitive features and things that might be more interesting to some of those older demographics? And again, that's just a microcosm of one game, but you can expand that across to your different portfolio, and then also industry wide as well, right?
So who's winning in that? I'd be interested, because it is a trade-off. I mean, you've got the diehards. That's deep loyalty, but that might be a demographic that isn't the younger demographic.
In reality, you try to do you try to think about um, tailoring experiences to different types of players, and eventually, like, I guess the holy grail in the future is, how do you tailor the entire experience to on a per player basis?
Yes.
Going back to the TikTokification of things, like, one of the reasons that those types of apps are killing it nowadays, again, like TikTok or Instagram, YouTube, Netflix, some of these, like, reality is that they've built these amazing recommendation engines, right? And those recommendation engines are extremely tailored. So maybe that's the future of gaming. Is, I don't know how we do that, because it's
Recommendation.
much more complicated than just serving video content, but to some degree, how do we tailor people's experiences based on what they're looking for and their behaviors and their motivations?
That's interesting. Recommendation, therefore, is going to be part of, here's the game for you, because it really is for you. Others say that what we're going to do is we're going to have AI sort of build games for each persona, but maybe we don't have to build them for each persona. We just have to recommend them better out of what we have.
I think over time, the more you're able to tailor that experience to what players like. I mean, some players are hyper competitive, and therefore leaderboard based events are going to be and clan based events are going to be much more interesting to them than someone who's kind of just was a completionist, and maybe like collecting cards and trading cards and things like that might be more interesting. And again, royal match is being kind of, and I mentioned royal match a lot because I think a lot of us in the industry feel it's sort of at the moment sort of
It is the benchmark.
the benchmark in match
It is.
three.
Yes.
um, you know, the way Candy Crush used to be, and so like they've done an amazing job in terms of offering all these different sort of experiences around a very beautifully well designed core, and so I think like the ability to sort of tailoring of experience is something that they would probably be probably where the future is to some degree.
Content is the new audience, right? We're also looking a lot at building publisher side audiences. How's that looking with you and at Rovio?
I think then when it comes to companies themselves and developers, like publishers themselves, um, the ability to sort of contact players directly or keep have more of like a CRM experience is interesting. It's not easy. It's not a simple thing to build out. We very much have the mindset of Reds Club, which our vision for that is a loyalty program tied to being able to play on web. Maybe in the future our own direct distribution, but TBC where the market goes there. But again, that's more tied to our like the loyalty vision that we have. And what is true, and without going into too many details about what we're doing there, but what is true is that because acquisition is quite complex and of course it's expensive, being able to maximize your players' retention, engagement, and loyalty and spend is definitely something to care about.
Another thing that audiences sort of gravitate to is big brands, right? Engaging big brands. Now, you've done that at Rovio, but maybe you can draw from that strategies that might encourage big brands to shift their advertising focus more towards gaming apps, or their presence even more towards gaming apps, because that's coming together. And that was something I picked up also at RovioCon. Bring the brands into the games, make that work.
Yeah, so I mean, there's two ways of looking at this, right? So there's the using IP to make games based on IPs, and normally those are entertainment IPs, and or building or turning your own game into an IP itself. Like obviously that's what Rovio did with Angry Birds, but we also now, because we're part of the Sega group, we have access to Sonic and some other great IP. So we're working on a game with Sonic the Hedgehog, and it's an incredible IP, and what Sega's done with that IP over the last decade has been incredible, especially reviving it, and now it's stronger than it's ever been with a whole new generation of fans, not just those of us in our early 40s who grew up loving Sonic in the early 90s, but a lot of young kids, really, thanks to the TV shows on Netflix and other streaming platforms. So I think that in that sense, transmedia is very powerful. I think coming back to your original question, though, in-game ad monetization is mainly driven by other games, advertising within games. But bigger companies like King, like Rovio, and some others have the ability to do direct deals with brands, and that's always really interesting. I think programmatic for brands in mobile gaming is a bit tough because of what I talked about, LTV, right? So the ability to outbid a game is always going to be really complicated for a brand looking for brand playing brand CPMs. And so in that sense, I think programmatic is for brand advertising is still a little bit in mobile gaming is still a little bit far off. But I think doing bespoke direct deals is definitely a thing. It's a real thing. And then I think where you take this even further is kind of playing off the topic we just talked about of like actually having games with IPs, even in-game collabs with IPs. And we've done a couple. We did one with YouTube Premium. So we had sort of this in-game gamification that if you got to a certain level of progress in the game, you were able to win a few months of free subscription. And then we were being paid based on how many of those converted to actually full-time subscribers. And then we did something very similar with Apple Music. And again, like that's a different approach, right? Where you actually look at partnering with a brand, maybe not necessarily an entertainment brand, but partnering with a brand that wants to grow, have their own growth strategies and their own growth needs, and how can our mobile gaming audience help contribute to their growth initiatives, and in exchange we then monetize our games further, right? So it's definitely interesting.
And also Extremely smart, because you're not having to teach or learn a new habit. I play the game. So if it's through that action that there's another avenue, as you said, a vector of growth, then that's good for everyone, not disruptive to the game, and definitely interesting to explore. I want to switch to that, the types of trends that you see just over the horizon, optimizing monetization, right? It's changed the last year. Monetization landscape is very, very different. What for you are the key trends or shifts, and what would you want to possibly place some money on as a prediction for 2025?
Yeah, that's a good one. So first of all, IP and ad revenue are both really interesting monetization vectors for mobile free to play. But I would say that the future is mainly hybrid monetization between those two kind of classic forms of monetization. Um, and I think the hybrid casual topic that we discussed earlier is an example of why hybrid monetization, I think, is probably one of the best ways to monetize your games. Players do enjoy, and we see this time and time again. Players do enjoy incentivized ads. They do not enjoy, in your face ads that kind of break the experience and break the player journey. But giving them the opportunity to get additional free items in the game at their own pace, when they want, how they want, um, has proven, both through research and through A/B testing, to be the best experience that we can give players in terms of retention, LTV, and similar things. The challenge is always how to design that in a way that doesn't cannibalize your IAP revenue. But if you can find ways to do it that is complementary, I think it's great, because it helps you, A, monetize players that you're not normally monetizing, and then B, it helps you enhance the monetization of some players you are already monetizing. So finding the right bespoke experience depending on sort of their behavior and the type of user that you have is very important. But I really think that, at least in the short term and midterm, hybrid monetization is definitely going to be the winning formula and the winning strategy.
Yeah, we talked about most of the trends, but of course, I think the mega, and I wrote about it even recently at Forbes, was diversification. It's a big deal. You're either going to see people going more into D2C, or they're going to be looking at different distribution channels, exploring alternative models. What kinds of models are you exploring that show promise, both maybe in monetization as well as innovation in traditional channels? Because it doesn't mean you have to go to new channels, just look at existing channels differently.
Yeah. So this is a space that we monitor very closely. There's a lot of shifting trends that are happening on the legislative side and judicial side, and the reality is that both Apple and Google have been incredibly great partners for us. I would say the first thing is always, like, how can we improve and continue to improve the relationships with both Apple and Google, and find ways where, if they are taking a big cut, which is 30%, that, how do we make sure that we're getting as much value from that, from us paying them that amount. And so a lot of our conversations with them are around, kind of thinking constructively about, maybe less about the fee, but more about how do we get more value of the relationship. Of course, there's new folks coming in, like Epic. Microsoft have mentioned in the past that they're interested in app distribution. I think um, Digital Turbine and some of these others have also been thinking about this. I think it's our responsibility to look at all the different options on the table. I don't know that the legislation today is really there yet. I know the DMA is changing a lot of things in terms of how much they're opening things up, but it still needs to make business sense, right? And at the moment, it's hard to find models in which you don't still have to pay a fee to Apple or Google, and so it's really hard to find the business model today that would allow us to distribute alternatively, in a way that would be a true cost saving for us. Um, and again, that's why a lot of focus is also already on how do we get more value out of the 30% we pay Apple and Google, and then how do we make sure that when we do look at new opportunities, we're thinking about the bigger business picture with them as partners.
Speaking of value, you're talking about finding more value in your partnerships, and I have found a lot of value in connecting with you, Luis. I don't get to chat with you as much and as deeply because we're, at events or at parties, but now to have a sit down and have a proper discussion with you, I look very much forward to continuing this because, Luis, you think about a lot of things at a lot of levels, and I appreciate that you share that.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy. It's an honor and a privilege to be on your podcast. And as I said, like I've been a listener in the past, and podcasting for me has been a real great way for me to kind of keep up to date with what's happening in the industry. As I mentioned before, like user acquisition is not my background, and product marketing was more my background. And when I started to come into more sort of managerial and leadership roles, I needed to especially on the user acquisition side, learn really really quickly, and try to get up to speed, so that I would be a good leader to some of the great UA people that I've been able to work with over the years. And podcasting has been a great source of insight and learning for me. Really, really glad that folks like yourself are creating content that is really great for us to sort of level up our skills and our knowledge and our thinking. And so, being able to add my part here is definitely an honor. And thank you, Peggy. I really appreciate it.
You and product marketing, you are, for me, you join the thought leaders, Luis, hands down. And I'm so pleased that some of my UA podcasts in the past, that they have been helpful. I've heard that from people, that they have learned from them. And I mean, that's what it's all about. It is about learning. It is about sharing. And on that note, because it's all good, you have a lot to offer and to share at a time when, yes, product and marketing, they have come together. The stars are aligned for us coming together many, many more times in the future. Luis, thanks so much for sharing.
No, thank you, Peggy. Appreciate it.
And of course, if you're tuning into In the Groove on YouTube, well, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. It will allow you to stay up to date with the series. And not only that, enjoy the pure gold of knowledge and insights our guests bring to every episode.